-4 and counting.
Good morning and welcome to AirOccupy. This is the show that speaks truth to power and will occupy your mind for the next hour. I'm Liz and I'm here with Jerry. And Shannon's not here this week, but we wish her well. So today we're going to talk about a few topics. First, we're going to update on the nuclear, what's going on with protests. Hiroshima Day is coming up, and we will take a call from Alaric Balibrera. We talked to him a few weeks ago. He is still on hunger strike in front of Los Alamos laboratories. Next, we'll talk about guns, gun control, and give you some statistics and history in case you don't know what the laws are and you want to know about what's gun violence, what's going on. And then finally, we'll talk about Anaheim. And I don't know if everyone knows what's going on in Anaheim. I don't know that the mainstream media has really publicized that, but we'll talk about a different kind of gun violence that's going on in that area.
A little police violence. Yeah, I think the main thrust of today's show is going to start a discussion here in Daytona and elsewhere about gun violence and where we go from here. I know there's been a lot of talk this week about this not being the appropriate time to talk about it in the wake of the Aurora massacre, but if not now, when, people? We need to have a discussion about this and about how this impacts our health, the public health of our country.
Yeah. So first we want to talk about protests, anti-nuclear protests. They're still going on in Tokyo. Imagine that.
That's 70,000 people protested in Tokyo, I think it was Sunday.
Yep.
Again, relating to the government's proposed moratorium on nuclear power, which they've gone back on now.
The one thing that I noticed when I was reading up on this story, the Japanese mainstream media has refused to follow the anti-nuclear movement. The anti-nuclear movement's having trouble getting traction there, and one of the reasons is because TEPCO, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, has deployed $300 million a year in advertising to promote the nuclear energy. But a recent survey found that 47% of the public feels solidarity with the protesters. And
there's a new report out, I guess, latter part of last week, one of the first reports on the Fukushima Daiichi incident came out and largely blamed TEPCO from beginning to end about their safety procedures and their backup electrical power. I think we had a comment on that show that something like that couldn't happen here in the U.S., but I guess over the weekend we had almost the exact same scenario unfold at an Arkansas reactor where the electrical power failed.
Yeah, there was a loss of AC power to the emergency operations facility in the Arkansas nuclear plant on July 26th. Normally the backup generator would kick right on, but in this case it didn't. And the emergency operations facility was without power for 13 minutes before AC power was restored by I think it was either the county or city, I don't remember, but 13 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're trying to cool nuclear fuel rods, 13 minutes,
well, this
tick-tock.
This is what the causal factor was at Fukushima, right? The loss of power, and notwithstanding that there was a tsunami that came in and blew up their backup power as well. Arkansas is not free from tornadoes or seismic activity. So we have the same designs on the same kind of plants here, and we ought to be aware that it can happen here.
Yeah, and the reason the power was out was because of a relatively minor thunderstorm. I mean, there was a thunderstorm, but it wasn't like it was a tornado or any other major weather event. It was just power went out, backup generators didn't come on.
So I guess also today we're going to talk a little bit about Hiroshima Day. Its anniversary is this weekend. There are nuke-free now actions this weekend as well, and I guess we'll talk a little bit to Alaric about that.
Yeah, I was going to bring back something about Tokyo, though. The study that found that 47% of the public feels solidarity it was also that solidarity with the protesters has also been felt by the protesters. Usually in Tokyo, the police are fairly strict about protesting. People get arrested, people are silenced. But in these most recent protests, it has led many to believe that there are many sympathizers in the police department because there have been no or very few arrests in the Tokyo protests, which is kind of interesting to note.
Well, it's a new cross-section of people that are in these protests. It's the real 99%. It's not one group of young people or anarchists or an odd, obscure extreme party out in the street. It's normal, average people in a small place that's been impacted in ways that they don't even know yet, and they're not getting straight information from the government about food supply and additional dangers. And now the government has proposed, well, let's restart some of our plants down south, putting out the notion that they're going to run out of power this summer if they don't have input from those plants.
Yeah, the protest, there was an interview with a woman who was at a protest, and the interviewer asked her, well, why weren't you more angry? It seemed like a very calm protest, and the woman said, well, I was very angry when I came out because I'm very angry about what happened, but then I turned around and I looked right next to me, and there was a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old holding their candles. It was a candlelight vigil in Tokyo, and they were holding their candles, and she said, I can't, I'm very angry, but we really have to think about, we don't want to be violent. We want peaceful protests. So even in Tokyo, peaceful protests, just like Occupy.
There's going to be a rally for a nuclear-free future in D.C. on September 20th and 22nd, so mark that down on your calendars. As I said before, Hiroshima Day is this weekend, and there are a number of actions planned by a number of organizations, including Nuke Free Now, all across the world this weekend.
Yeah, most of Nuke Free Now's protests and activities this weekend are on the West Coast. I know there's an art exhibit on Friday and a film festival that they're having about nuclear energy and also nuclear weapons, something that we didn't talk about the other day, but it's a very important topic. I heard this morning when I was listening to the Bill Press show that the U.S. is now testing new nuclear weapons, unbelievably. Our nuclear arsenal is very, very old, and so the U.S. is going back into and upgrading all of the nuclear weapons that we currently have. I don't know if they're creating new nuclear weapons, but I know that they're upgrading them, and we have begun some tests.
Yeah, the so-called modernization process continues, but that is replacing older weaponry with newer techniques, newer, more powerful delivery vehicles, etc. So it is a new generation of weapons. We're going to take a break now, and when we come back...
Actually, Alaric's on the phone. We will... just a second. Hi, AirOccupy, you're on the air.
Hi, is this Liz?
Yes, this is Liz. How are you, Alaric?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. I'm on day 16 of the hunger strike here in Los Alamos.
How are you holding up?
Yeah.
How's your health holding up?
It's doing well. I don't like to get up and run up and down stairs, but aside from that, I'm doing pretty well. And there are 2 other people with me who are also still striking and also still on day 16, and 30 other people who are striking for lesser periods of time, but still striking with
That's great. So if somebody missed it, explain for us why you're on a hunger strike and what you're doing.
Well, we're on a hunger strike because we believe that what we're doing with this hunger strike is we're calling for transformation at the laboratories in Los Alamos. We want the science used there and the brilliant minds used there to create life-sustaining science and not life-threatening science. 2/3 of the $2.25 billion budget there is used for weapons research and development. And we really think that instead of developing new, more powerful weapons, we could be finding the solutions for cancer and Alzheimer's and HIV, and creating solutions. And that's what we want to see our best minds doing, is making solutions.
You mentioned something about a family member on Facebook. Would you like to tell us about your revelation that you've had while fasting? Would you like to talk about that?
Well, that was last week, and it was a very difficult week. I have a 20-month-old nephew who is a little angel, and he collapsed while playing last Wednesday and stopped breathing and turned blue. And through the efforts of his father, who miraculously was there and watching him at that moment, his father had to give him CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and kept him alive and breathing until the ambulance got there. And then my nephew River went into seizures in the ambulance and seized in the hospital, which is when we were called. We rushed over, and it was so critical that they had to airlift him to the University of New Mexico Hospital down in Albuquerque.
I'm so sorry.
And so it was really difficult. But I realized in the middle of my grief, because they didn't know if he was going to make it, and I was praying, and I realized in the middle of my tears that no one knew why this was happening, and I realized it was much like the people who get contaminated and poisoned by just living near places downwind or downwater from, like, Hanford, Washington, or Rocky Flats, Colorado, Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, where you don't know why your loved ones are getting sick and getting ill and dying. There's never a diagnosis of, very rarely is there a diagnosis of exposure poisoning. And this is why your loved one is dying. And so I thought, this is what happens to families, so who lose loved ones, and they don't know why, through radioactive contamination. So that experience inspired me to dedicate this fast to the families who have lost loved ones due to radioactive contamination, or in fact any kind of chemical contamination. And I'm doing this for the world that our children live in, so that they don't have to deal with this.
Right. Well, I admire greatly what you're doing. I think it's wonderful and a very potent reminder of what nuclear power, how nuclear power can take away life.
Well, nuclear power, these radioactive elements,
weapons. Excuse me.
Yeah, the nuclear power and the waste from it, and the production of nuclear weapons. I mean, this stuff is so toxic that the plutonium trigger that is in the head of a nuclear warhead is about the size of a softball, and it is toxic enough to kill everyone on the planet by itself. By itself, and we've made some 70,000 of these and put them in bombs. And right now, the United States still has 5 of these active, and just a couple of thousand of these are on hair trigger alert. And and in the meantime, I mean, I might have told you last time, Los Alamos is per capita the second richest county in America. And it's also surrounded by counties with some of the highest rates of child poverty in the nation. So, I wonder, who are we to allow this kind of, our values being upside down like this? I mean, here a corporation, mostly Bechtel, is making $65 million pure profit per year to administrate the laboratory, while children next door starve. And they get, not only that, they make $65 million pure profit to make genocidal weapons while children next door starve. It's incredible. Who are we?
We're upside down, man.
Yeah. So that's another big reason for the hunger strike, and another big reason is that we're all downwinders from this.
Yeah.
They've got contaminated. I mean, Los Alamos is on a seismic fault so substantial that Bush Sr. issued an executive order to retrofit the buildings to withstand an earthquake should an earthquake happen, and they have not complied with that. So one of my demands is they comply with this, so that an earthquake does not set off a radioactive cloud that that travels over the whole globe. I mean, everybody in the world is a downwinder with this stuff, and the radioactive waste that we're producing there, we've got 70,000 tons of radioactive waste, and it never goes away. The half-life of plutonium is 125,000 years, or some incredible, it's essentially forever, and plutonium is so poisonous that the things that it contaminates become contaminated themselves. And we just have no capability right now to store this stuff safely anywhere in the world. I mean, we have no containers that last 100,000 years. It's just seeping out into the headwaters, to the aquifers, and the only people who are suffering this are the people like my nephew, and our children, and I really think that we don't have time. The reason I'm hunger striking now is because I believe that we don't have time to mess around anymore. We need a transformation now. And the transformation that I'm going for right now is the transformation for disarmament in my heart. Because I believe this needs to be a transformation in consciousness first. Because science is neutral. Science is wonderful and terrible. It just depends on how you use it. And what I want to do is take away all the fear, all the anger, all the hurt, all the competition in my heart, so that I'm waging war against nobody. And I saw an interesting cover on a scientific magazine in the supermarket every day where biologists are questioning whether competition is actually the element that provided such that enabled us to be so successful in our evolution as a species. And instead they were suggesting that cooperation was, and I thought, duh. Of course, cooperation makes us successful in it. Because look what's happening. Look at the destruction that competition is creating, and it's just so unprecedented and so huge that this sea change of transformation needs to happen now. Because tomorrow we may not be around. There may not be time to stage a hunger strike tomorrow, because the way we're going, we may not have much time on this. Extinction is a real possibility at this point. And so I thought with Occupy and finally people finally waking up to how fast things were going bad, that now is the time.
Now is the time. Alec, how long do you intend to continue on your fast?
Well, I intend to continue on this fast until I can have conversations with the people the people in power. I need to have conversations with my senators, with my representative, with the governor of New Mexico, and the director of the laboratory, Charles McMillan. And that's one of the things that I wanted to ask if your listeners will help with, is by writing an email to Charles McMillan and asking him to see me and to see the strikers. I have his email address here, And what we want to do in this conversation is open the conversation about the possibilities of transforming the science at the laboratory to life-sustaining.
Alaric,
his email.
I know that you have given me that information. Email that to me again. Give it out over the air, please, but email it to me and we'll post it on our Facebook page.
Oh, absolutely. His email is McMillan, McMillan, McMillan1 at lanl.gov.
And
LAN.
how do you spell that?
LANL stands for Los Alamos National Laboratory. So It's McMillan1 at lanl.gov.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you so much for calling us and telling us your story. I know that...
If I could, I'd like to just announce one more thing. There are going to be some events in Santa Fe and Los Alamos this weekend, because this weekend is the Hiroshima commemoration. It's the 67th anniversary of dropping the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And Occupy Santa Fe, allied with a lot of groups, other Occupies, Pax Christi, Friends, Vets for Peace, have scheduled a whole bunch of events from this Friday to this Monday, a direct action on this Monday. And I'd like to invite everybody and anybody to come out and support us in this call for transformation this weekend.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And I would ask all the listeners for Hiroshima Day to honor it in your own way. And tell us about how you honor it. I know Nuke Free Now has on their nukefreenow.org has a section where you can say how if you're going to go on hunger strike, and I encourage people just to say, hey, this is how I'm honoring Hiroshima Day.
Absolutely. You can hunger strike for 24 hours. You can hunger strike for any amount of time that you'd like. And not only that, this is a revolution in consciousness. If you can just pray or meditate or stand in awareness and hold space, that also is a profound aid in shifting the consciousness of the entire planet. So, everything helps.
Everything does.
Strength to you, man.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much for calling in. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye, Alaric.
Okay. Bye.
We are going to take a little bit of break, and when we come back, we will be talking about guns.
A young cowboy named Billy Joe grew restless on the farm. A boy filled with wanderlust who really meant no harm. He changed his clothes and shined his boots and combed his dark hair down. And his mother cried as he walked out, "Don't take your guns to town, son. Leave your guns at home, Bill. Don't take your guns to town." He laughed and kissed his mom and said, "Your Billy Joe's a man. I can shoot as quick and straight as anybody can. But I wouldn't shoot without a cause, I'd gun nobody down." But she cried again as he rode away, "Don't take your guns to town, son. Leave your guns at home, Bill. Don't take your guns to town." He sang a song his own, he rode, his guns hung at his hips. He rode into a cattle town, a smile upon his lips. He stopped and walked into a bar and laid his money down. But his mother's words echoed again, "Don't take your guns to town, son. Leave your guns at home, Bill. Don't take your guns to town."
This is AirOccupy, and we're back. I'm Liz, and I'm here with Jerry. And that was Johnny Cash, "Don't Take Your Guns to Town," a classic. Goodie but oldie. Wanted to talk about guns.
So yeah, here we are, a little over a week after the worst gun massacre in U.S. history, and we thought it important to address the issue of gun violence and the impacts on public health that we've seen from these repeated shootings at schools, workplaces, and now movie theaters. And in order to do that, as the theme of our show has always been that we need to educate ourselves about gun laws and about where we're at in terms of public health statistics and where we stand as a country in terms of gun ownership and things like that. So we thought to start this discussion, which we hope will be an ongoing one on the show, because it's obviously a pandemic problem that we have, that we begin sort of an educational process, just starting to talk about, what's the state of the law? What do you need to do in the U.S. and in your particular state to own a gun? Are there any limits on you owning guns? And should there be limits on you owning guns and ammunition? And just talk about it from the perspective of, I think I saw a statistic that we have 10,000 gun homicides on average in the United States a year. So there's 10,000 people being shot to death every year in this country. And I looked it up, and comparing ourselves to other developed countries like Germany and France, where they average 150 gun deaths a year. That I suggest that something is awry in America when you have that kind of a disparity of statistics.
Well, it's funny, even after Aurora, recent polls by the Pew Research Center found that attitudes towards gun controls don't change much after mass shootings, which I found kind of interesting. 47% said it is important to control gun ownership, and 46% said it is important to protect ownership. So 47% want to control the guns, 46% want to protect ownership, and that's essentially the same numbers that the Pew Research Foundation found in April. But there were 67% said that shootings after Aurora, 67% said that the shootings are isolated acts by troubled individuals, not a broader social problem. And this number went down from the shootings in Virginia Tech and after the shooting in Tucson, Arizona of Gabby Giffords, the former Arizona U.S. representative. So after Virginia Tech, 47% said that the shootings are isolated incidents, and after Tucson, it was 58%. Which I thought was kind of interesting, that the attitudes don't necessarily change, and we think that it's isolated shooters.
It's interesting that the polls on the why of these incidents is kind of belied by the statistics relating to gun purchases after these massacres. I read this morning that there's been a huge spike in gun sales in the wake of the Aurora shooting, and I guess you can only lay that at the door of fear. That people are afraid. I mean, I can't go to the movie theater and watch a movie without threat of being gunned down. Is so ludicrous to think that that's kind of the state of affairs we have in this country.
I was looking at polls, and another poll from 2011 found that, like the healthcare bill, people have some opinions on the whole about gun control versus gun ownership, but when you break it out and you ask specific questions on specific issues, the numbers change a little. So 60% of respondents to this poll, it's another Pew Research Center poll, found that they strongly or somewhat agree with the statement that because of the Second Amendment, state and local governments are not allowed to ban handguns. So they believe that the Second Amendment does protect your right to have a handgun, even in high crime areas. But for a ban on semi-automatic assault weapons, except for police or military, 62% favor banning them, whereas only 35% say that we should protect gun owners' rights to own these type of weapons. And then you always have the small smattering of people who are clueless and don't answer or are unsure. I don't know. I don't understand those people, but whatever.
So let's talk a little bit more about numbers. It's kind of well-known fact that we have approximately 300 million privately owned guns in the country, and that's more than one gun per person over 18. As I said before, we averaged 10,000 gun homicides per year for the last 10 years. We've averaged 16,000 gun suicides per year. on an ongoing basis, and we have an average of 1,000 accidental deaths by gun each year, largely by kids getting their hands on guns in households that aren't properly locked down.
Just another stat, U.S. homicide rates are 6.9 times higher than the rate in 22 other populous high-income countries combined, despite similar non-lethal crime and violence rates. So the firearm homicide rate in the U.S. is 19.5 times higher than in other countries. And I think one of the reasons that is because the U.S. is saturated with guns. We have 5% of the population across the world, but we own over 50% of the guns. That's kind of a sobering fact.
Yeah, access to guns clearly is an issue. I mean, you look at these other places with lower rates of homicide by gun and suicide by gun, and they have rather strict gun control regimes in place. And that's the one difference between us and them. We don't have any of the same types of restrictions, and guns are readily available in the U.S.
Yeah. So, Jared, tell us a little bit about the legal framework of owning a gun. I know that there is a registry.
Let me give you the quick genesis on that, and just bear with me for a second, because I think this is important for all of us to understand sort of the legal developments that have occurred. We had a Federal Firearms Act of 1938, which dealt with the manufacture and sale of guns. That was joined by the Federal Firearms License Act. And then subsequently in the 60s, we passed the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968, the Gun Control Act of 1968, and the Bradley Handgun Violence Protection Act of 1993. And what those laws contained over the years were restrictions on the manufacture and sale of firearms by dealerships and ammunition, and set up a system where there was a background check done for the purchase of a handgun. That was largely done in the Brady Handgun Violence Protection Act. Jim Brady, as you know, was famously shot in the assassination attempt by John Hinckley on Ronald Reagan. And he went on and his wife to establish the Brady Foundation on handgun violence. And they've been proponents of having gun registration and gun control for many years. And that was the highlight of their activity, at least up till 1993, was the Brady Handgun Violence Protection Act. In 1994, we went one step further, and we created the Federal Assault Weapons Ban, which put certain semi-automatic weapons that mimicked automatic weapons onto a list. They couldn't be sold in the United States. That ban, however, expired in 2004, and those weapons can be readily bought in the United States at this point.
I'd like to note that we talk a lot about the Second Amendment, and it says the right to bear arms. Yes, it does. It also talks about a militia, but we do recognize some legal restraints on arms. We're not talking about flamethrowers. You can't have a flamethrower. You can't have a tank. You can't have I don't know. I don't know much about guns, sorry. The different types. But, we do agree.
We've had a history of these laws that I mentioned all had restrictions on not only guns and their sale and manufacture, and what dealers needed to do to keep track of guns and register guns and do background checks on the FBI, quick check. But it also applied to ammunition. You couldn't have high-capacity ammunition feeding devices. So we've had a history, even in the presence of the Second Amendment, and I'll get to that in a minute as things developed. In the last couple of years, the Supreme Court turned its attention finally after a couple hundred years to what does the Second Amendment actually mean. But that was decided against a backdrop of about 100 years worth of legislation where Congress thought it had the power and exercised the power to regulate gun ownership and put certain requirements on it, and they did so in all these. There's a whole litany of acts that they've passed.
Jerry was telling me this morning about the in 1792 the gun restrictions. What did it say?
Well, this is part of the Second Amendment story, and as we all know, the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution provides the following: a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It wasn't until 2008 that the Supreme Court thought they needed to decide what that meant. And in a case called Heller versus the District of Columbia, they determined that Washington, D.C.'s handgun control law violated the Constitution because people have, under the Second Amendment, notwithstanding the clause about a well-regulated militia, which the Supreme Court simply ignored, a right to bear arms, an individual right to bear arms. That was followed up a couple of years later in a case of McDonald versus Chicago, where that right was extended to the states through the incorporation clause of the 14th Amendment. Interestingly, recently Justice Scalia has appeared on, I believe it was a Fox News Sunday morning talk show, where he said further definition of the limits of regulation by the government will come from the court in future cases. But he suggested that we would need to look to the founders' intent. And they lived in an era, obviously, where they had muskets. And whether or not people who were dealing in a technological environment, which bearing arms meant carrying muskets, how was that supposed to play out in an age where we have handheld rocket launchers, high-powered weaponry, 50 caliber machine guns, flamethrowers,
Clips.
you name it, extended clips, etc. And what Liz was talking about was, interestingly, the Second Amendment was adopted in 1791, and in 1792, Congress, being among the founding members of the adoption of the Second Amendment, they were there at the time, members of Congress, they knew what was meant by that, passed the Malicious Acts of 1792. And what that act did was conscript all free, able-bodied white men into a militia, and it required each of them to own a good musket, a bayonet, and 24 individual cartridges. So that's the context in which I think Justice Scalia is suggesting he's going to decide the next Second Amendment case. Good luck to him in divining what it means in the year 2012.
Because I don't know many people that have muskets. And yeah. I found, and I'm sure some of our listeners have heard this, Chris Rock had a really funny take on gun control, and I'd like to play that for you. Excuse the beeps. If you know Chris Rock, he's needs to be beeped on radio. So
everybody talking about gun control. Gotta get rid of the guns. Fuck that, I like guns. You got a gun, you don't have to work out. I ain't working out. I ain't jogging. You got pecs, I got pecs. Oh, man, shit. You don't need no gun control. You know what you need? We need some bullet control. We need to control the bullets. That's right. I think all bullets should cost $5,000. $5,000 for a bullet. You know why? Because if a bullet costs $5,000, there'll be no more innocent bystanders. Every time somebody gets shot, you be like, damn, he must have did something. Shit, they put $50,000 worth of bullets in his hand.
that was Chris Rock. Gotta love it.
I think you have my property.
Yes, I think you might have my property.
So we've been talking about a little bit about the backdrop of the statistics and a little bit about the laws. I hope this isn't too confusing, but we think it's important to predicate all these discussions on where we are, what are the facts, what's the state of the reality. I think we find ourselves in a position of a fairly toxic mix of readily available weapons, a hopelessly broken mental health system, which, far from being able to identify people, much less treat them, is simply not working. We see in these repeated massacres. We have a hodgepodge of state laws, all the way from stand your ground to concealed carry, and it looks like we're headed back into the Wild West with this kind of amalgamation of things happening.
Yeah, I was reading from some firearm and crime statistics that found that, according to a 1997, so this is a little bit old, but 1997 survey of state prison inmates, among those possessing a gun during their crime, Only 2% got their guns from a flea market or gun show, 12% from a retail store or pawn shop, which interestingly has the requirement to check the registry. I think Jerry will go over a little bit of that in just a sec. But 80% found their guns from a family member, a friend. They bought it on the street, or it was from an illegal source. So even though we have the gun registry, I'm not sure what we need to do to beef that up, because it's not working.
Well, it's belied by its large loophole, and that is the gun show sales, where there are no background checks needed to be made, and you can buy as many weapons as you want. Also, I think one of the other issues that's come up is that the shooter in Aurora, Colorado, purchased some 6,000 rounds of various kinds of ammunition online, and obviously there's no check on that. The assault weapons ban included some limitations on high-capacity devices for holding, in addition to clips and extended clips and whatnot. But, the question's been raised, why do you need a 30 or 50 or 100 round clip? What do you need that for? And is there some kind of balance that we can strike in this country between shooters, hunters, target shooters, people that have guns for personal protection in their homes, that finds some kind of balance between having a gun for those purposes and anyone under the sun having access to guns and unlimited ammunition of all types of firepower? And can we have a discussion about finding the balance?
Yeah, it's been interesting because a lot has been said about the National Rifle Association and its powerful lobby. And it seems to me that the NRA can't continue to advocate for more and more free guns. We have to have some sort of restrictions. I had heard that the NRA didn't want to prevent, didn't want to have the registry, didn't want to prevent anyone from buying a gun, and I think that that's silly. I don't think that our country needs to move towards such a Wild West atmosphere.
Well, I think that, the NRA is an interesting organization, and as somebody in Occupy, I've been for a long time held the view that these industry finance lobbying groups who lobby for and control our Congress shouldn't be allowed to make the laws for the rest of us. We have a public health crisis that emanates from this gun violence. We have blood running in our streets. I mean, anybody who read any story this weekend about Chicago, and you're going to read about shootings. We're going to do a bit at the end here about some gun violence on the part of the police in Anaheim. So, it reaches to every facet and every corner of our society.
And the NRA, for as strong of a lobby as it is, has only 4.3 million members. That's a small percentage of the population that's in the United States. And when the NRA was conceived, it was to protect hunters' rights rather than handgun owners' rights.
It's interesting. You hear oftentimes people refer to the polls that have been done of NRA members. And in fairness to NRA members, the individual membership, the people that sign up to get gun education and who are responsible gun owners, a good percentage of those people believe that reasonable restrictions on the ownership of guns and the access to guns and ammunition is a good thing. They're not opposed to it. In fact, it's the leadership of the NRA, who again depends on trade gun maker money to continue their vice grip on even having a discussion about this in Congress. It's taken a group there's a group called Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and we heard from Mayor Bloomberg, who heads up that association, who has called on the presidential candidates to have a debate about gun violence, because we don't hear anything about it. It's not an issue in the campaign, certainly. And despite sort of the well sort of carried around internet meme that President Obama was going to take away everybody's guns, and we need to fight against any gun regulation because they just want to take away all our guns. I mean, Obama, for the first time, mentioned guns about a week ago.
And he actually increased gun rights. You can now carry your gun into national parks. He signed that bill. So
The only law that's been passed during Obama's tenure is one that says now you can carry your guns in certain national parks. But he did say last Tuesday that automatic weapons are for soldiers, not for citizens. So we'll see if any kind of policy suggestions or legislative suggestions come out of that.
I think a lot of people think that automatic weapons are also for police. And when we get back, we're going to take a little break. We're going to listen to Occupation Freedom. It's a song by George Martinez and the Global Bank Collective off of an Occupy-related music album. But when we get back, we'll be talking about what happened in Anaheim and a different kind of gun violence.
I first was pepper sprayed, just standing on the side. But it took me being blinded to open up my eyes. 'Cause I'd read the daily news and not responded actively. And I realized then and there, this revolution needed me. So here I am, camped in a tent, which is really so convenient 'cause I can't afford my rent. But they came with shields and mace in the night while it was dark. A NYPD army sent to clear Zuccotti Park. We'll protest on with country phrases. We're going global from London to see Davis. If you think that your batons are going to get us to go home, go on and hit me. I'll just upload it from my phone until I die. I'll occupy as long as I know how to sit and hold this heavy sign. 'Cause the 99 is pissed and we will not be dismissed. I'll occupy. I'll occupy. Hell yeah.
Join us now.
Welcome back. We're talking a little bit today about gun violence, and we just talked a little bit about the background to some of the gun laws and some of the statistics, but there's a very disturbing couple of incidents in the last week in Anaheim, California. A couple of police-related shootings, in one case of an unarmed man, that resulted in immediate and large-scale protests on the part of people in the neighborhoods where the shootings occurred.
Yeah, in these neighborhoods, there was a shooting of Manuel Diaz about 10 days ago. He was shot in the back. There's a very graphic and heart-wrenching video online, if you care to see it. Diaz was 25 years old. He was unarmed. He was running when he was shot in the back, and he was left to lie on the ground bleeding to death as the police moved witnesses away from the scene. In this video, you can hear people in the background saying, "He's alive, man, call a cop." Well, of course, the cops were there, and then another woman was demanding, why would you guys shoot him in the head? And the officers in the video are saying, "Get back, get back, get back." And they're pushing mothers and young children away from the scene as they wrapped yellow crime scene tape around it. Then as the police then turned around and asked if they could buy the cell phones and the cell phone video off of the people who had it. I mean, at that point that they realized that it was what was on those tapes was a problem. The next day there was neighborhood residents gathered to protest what went on, and the police, when they were seeking to disperse the crowd, they began firing what appeared to be rubber bullets and beanbag rounds at women and children. During all this chaos, a police dog got away or was unleashed. There's conflicting reports as to what happened, and it attacked a toddler, and the mother and father tried to protect their child and were themselves attacked by the dog. That happened on a Saturday, and then on Sunday, the police shot and killed another man running away. His name was Joel Matthew Acevedo. He was 21, and he was armed. And the police maintained, just like they did with Diaz, that he was a suspected gang member. But the idea of police violence, the police, just in 2012, there's conflicting reports, but they have killed 5, 6, or 7 different suspects. There's been The community says that there's been 8 in Anaheim since the beginning of 2012. The Orange County District Attorney's Office claims 6, with 5 fatalities. Whether it's 6 or 8, it's a very large number, and it speaks to the fact that although gun violence is a problem, police gun violence has been rising in the United States. There was one major recent independent study by the Las Vegas Review-Journal in 2011 that confirmed anecdotal evidence drawn from all major metropolitan areas. And it found that if you are a young man, a person of color, and live in a poor urban area, you are far more likely to become a victim of police gunfire than if you are none of those things. The newspaper analyzed court cases, police data, and other documents. And the reason that they had to do that is because although we have all these statistics by national organizations about gun violence in general, no national organization collects information about police gun violence when police are involved in shootings of suspects. And I think part of the call that's happening in Anaheim is more accountability. What's going on? We need to know, and we need to find out.
Well, we need to know about what the policies are for lethal versus non-lethal use of force by the police. We need better trained police. We obviously need to have the ability of people in these communities to make their views known when the police aren't serving what they believe to be their best interests.
Yeah, interesting.
I was at least as disturbed by the shootings, which are a daily event in our big cities, to the response by the police to the people that had gathered to protest against what had happened and the level of violence employed.
Yeah, and interestingly, Anaheim does not have a citizen complaint line, which is funny because you'd think that they would have that. Looks like we're out of time. We're
going to look to continue this discussion about guns and drill down on it. Hope to hear from some listeners about it in the future.
Just a couple announcements. The 2012 Veterans for Peace Conference is coming up August 8th through 12th in Miami. We're also ask everybody to honor in their own way Hiroshima Day on August 6th. And next week we're going to be talking about drones. So tune in. This has been AirOccupy.
Peace.
This program was paid for by its sponsor, which is solely responsible for its content and the views expressed. When you hear Goliath bark, you know you're tuned to WELE, Ormond Beach.
Here's the latest from ABC News. I'm Daria Albinger. The housing industry sure hopes it can build on